the Austin lesbian, gay, the LGBT chamber. I'm so sorry, Tina. And so Tina Cannon. And then I'd also like to introduce Marina Vagrava. Hi, Marina. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
And I believe that Tomas Miranda, who's the interim CEO for the Hispanic Chamber, may not be able to be on this call. I think he had another conflict, but we also want to acknowledge the Hispanic Chamber as well. And that being said, I wanted to go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. And we have, I think, first up is Sharmila.
Correct.
Correct. And then I'm going to try to say your last name. So
Mukherjee.
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 I apologize for my Southern accent.
No need whatsoever. You've done well.
Okay. Sharmila joined CapMetro Transportation Authority in early November as the EVP of Planning and Development. Welcome, Sharmila. And then once Sharmila does her presentation, Sam Sargent, who serves as the Deputy Chief of Staff for CapMetro Metropolitan Transportation Authority, will also do a presentation, and I believe that they may have time for Q&A at the end of each session. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you all for joining us. And Sharmila, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon. As I'm Sharmila Mukherjee, and joined CapMetro in November 2019, and it's been about 8 months, and it's interesting 8 months. Half of that was essentially in this unprecedented international crisis that we find ourselves in COVID. And I would say that in response to the crisis, how our agency rose to where we are today, I want to talk a little bit about that today as well, in addition to our agency overview, so you get a sense of, I think, our preparedness and how resilient we are as an agency moving forward. And then Sam's gonna cover what this resiliency could lead us to in our preparedness for Project Connect. So most of you may know, as CapMetro has been very supportive of the MECA, and you probably know our agency a little bit more, but just in case, we have an overview slide, and there's some information. So we have about 1.2 million residents, 7 cities, and here's our annual budget of 3.1 million ridership. 2019 number is something I would like to highlight, as we were consistently growing up until COVID, and we'll talk about that in one of the latter slides. Some of our, next slide, please. Thank you. Some of our recent successes is this 18 straight months of ridership growth, and 8.5% on a system-wide level in our Metro Express routes have seen in the earlier 2020, between January and April, on average, the ridership went up about 20%, and 20% plus, in some cases between 24 and 25%. It shows how well received our Metro Express services are. And you may already know that K through 12 kids ride free, school age, so that comprises about 3.5 million trips for us. Our on-demand pickup service it's based in demand response and innovative mobility side of things. I don't know if you're familiar with that. We have 6 active zones. It's very similar to our app, is very similar to Uber Lyft app, only you are, so it actually allows a lot of flexibility. And we are currently in discussion with one community in addition to the one that's scheduled already in later part of 2020. Our fleet electrification, we talk about that a little bit later on, so I'm going to skip over and move on to talk a little bit about what we are doing in the recovery process as we find ourselves unexpectedly in the middle of COVID-19. So this is a snapshot of our COVID-19 recovery and a response, mostly our response item. And then I would like to share some of our lessons through our recovery process and how we are preparing to move forward into early stabilization and restoration to hoping what we would get back, what we were prior to COVID. So our focus in this COVID-19 pandemic, when it all hit us unexpectedly mid-March, was on safety and security of our staff and customers. Most of our measures that we have taken are not unexpected or innovative or unusual, but I would say they're remarkable because we were the first agency to require, one of the first agencies that required, we were providing masks to our customers. We were also requiring masks for our rides. Some of this adjusted service schedule, I wanted to talk a little bit about what it typically takes to create a full service plan that goes in effect 3 times a year. And it takes about 3 to 4 months of preparation through service planning process. Then there's a public hearing requirement by FTA, and then we go through our board approval process. In the midst of this crisis, we certainly didn't have that type of time frame to work with, even though we didn't have any Title VI or kind of any public hearing requirement associated with that, because this was more of an emergency response situation. But we are so proud as an agency that we were able to do our service plan update within a span of a week and was able to operationalize that before many other agencies of our size who either unexpectedly had to cut service or were not have a systematic approach to operationalize the updated service plan. So we're very proud of that. And then we started rear door boarding, again, as a safety measure for both our staff and customer, and we were fare-free for the same reason. For a month of April and May. In June, we installed operator safety barriers, and that's the same time we reinstated our fares back. And June was also the month for unemployed aid fares, so workforce aid fare for the unemployed. So with all of that, and you have some of these other markers that I'm not going through individually, but feel free, there's a web page on our site that talks specifically, that speaks specifically to our pandemic response. Here's some highlights, some of our unfortunate ways that our agency was also personally hit with COVID-19. And our ridership impact is, I would say, there's an interesting twist here. All of the transit agencies across the nation and internationally have experienced decrease in system ridership. We also experienced the same, but we were able to retain about 40, even in some cases, on some weeks, 45% of our ridership. So anywhere between 40 to 45% of our ridership was retained through this crisis, which tells us one of two things, that, and I think it's a combination of two things, that we have, and just to kind of give you a parallel for that, BART, Chicago, CTA, and other major transit agencies in major metro areas have experienced far greater decrease in ridership. Their ridership went down in some cases between, and they retained 10 to 15% of their ridership. I think to a great extent, the difference is attributed to Austin does not have the high level of transit system that it really needs for the major metropolitan area that has become and going to be in upcoming years. I mean, and we're going to talk about Project Connect, so that's going to address our plan to address that. And then, as expected, 90% of our ridership and commuter service who have greater latitude to work from home and travel further distances to do so, that's where the ridership decrease was highest. Some of the financial impacts, it's important to talk about that. As important as our sales tax revenue is, we definitely lost, but decreases less than some of the other major metro areas, partly due to Austin's highly resilient economic base. And then ridership decrease also had less impact on our revenue because we're more reliant on sales tax revenue than some of the other major transit agencies in the rest of the country. I wanted to, so this is the cover of our recovery and improvement plan I'm sharing with you all. So it's also on our website. We have a page that's dedicated to our recovery and response. One thing I wanted to highlight is that our commitment to safety and security and for our operator and our staff, it was absolutely evident throughout our agency response to this crisis. And we are also taking into account that we don't have all the answers. There are so many known unknowns in this. We're trying our best to sort of come up with a framework that would be able to address some of these. And two items that I would like to mention, since we are kind of focusing on innovation in this presentation, that our ridership analysis group was able to come up with a ridership forecasting model that's very detailed, extremely robust, and competitive to many vendor-produced model. And I'm so proud to share that was able to take into account and customize some of the other levers. For example, if UT is not in session, or if UT comes back in fall with a hybrid learning model as they're planning to come back, how those variables would be addressed in our ridership forecasting and also in our revenue projection was able to be addressed by our internal staff in a highly robust model. So I'm sharing that. It's again, these are some of the inner workings of a transit agency that most may or may not be familiar with, but I think through gradual and new introductions of our both process improvement and innovative additions, we're trying to kind of do our best as we continue to provide service for the community. So this portion talks a little bit about technology and mobility, what our plans, either ongoing or upcoming in that area. In next slide, please. So I wanted to highlight micromobility, first and last mile solution, and what exists now and what we are going to be continuing to provide or improve down the road. So as you may know, that COVID-19 had a lot of unintended consequences, and one of them was it sort of flattened the demand for dockless scooters and bikes, and we have seen a reduction in availability in Uber and Lyft. And I think our pickup service, our demand response and innovative mobility group has done a phenomenal job. They partnered with, and I should have mentioned that earlier, but this is as good as time as any to mention that they have done a they created a partnership that's getting talked about nationwide for being the first agency to come up with a partnership with Central Texas Food Bank and Good Apple, HEB, and then also a partnership with Good Apple to provide grocery delivery to our most vulnerable population. So we are very proud of that. I think this is where I would get a little bit personal and give you my take on what I think innovation for transit means. It's more than technology. It is really process improvement in many cases where it improves all of our lives. So in that context, I definitely would include how innovative that was. Then Project Connect. We have a dedicated section on Project Connect, so I'm kind of skipping over, and we'll talk a little bit about how Project Connect would keep in mind the neighborhood circulator zones, and we'll have focused first in last mile connectivity with all of our major lines. So orange line and blue line and our METRORAPID routes are going to get talked about later part of the presentation. And then we're open to public-private partnerships. When I say open, we say that we are currently leveraging public-private partnerships to deliver where transit needs exist, and we're able to come, and that's both in our transit planning process and also in our facility improvements. So on the topic of sustainability, I want to mention that we are very focused on sustainable and on our sustainability measures and energy usage. We have, here are some of the kind of highlights of that, we currently have 4 electric buses in fleet. We have 8 on order. We were able to get 2 consecutive FTA grants to be able to take advantage of that and get new electric buses. And then we're also going through a study with Center of Transportation and Environment, a nonprofit group, to identify advanced charging guidance and how they would assist us in sort of electric vehicle system planning for our agency as we move forward in the next phase of planning. So METROBIKE partnership, some of you may have heard about it. This is definitely an area that we are moving forward in the middle of COVID-19, addressing the recovery process, and also moving forward with a partnership with City of Austin that have already gotten our board approval and City of Austin Mobility Committee approval, I believe. And this is going to be a joint effort between City of Austin and CapMetro, where we have one integrated interface for our customers to be able to ride our system and be able to use electric bikes. Customer payment system, and this I really think it's something that many of you would be interested in and find useful. We are starting our pilot for a contactless fare system, and this is in line with, we've been pursuing this opportunity for a while and kind of understand our needs for our system and come up with an approach that would be best. But we're very proud that we were able to get it. We got board approval on this this week, and our first pilot was going to be, I think, on the pilot would start in October of 2020, later this year. Phase 1 would have the next slide, please. Phase 1 would have fare capping. That would be more of an equity-based pilot. What that would do is, there are many recent studies in the country that show that our low-income riders, in a sense, pays more for transit service than others. And Portland was the first city in the country to be able to implement fare capping. And then now there are a lot of lessons learned in this. But what happens is, like, if an individual buys a pass, a single ride, so what this would do is, after multiple usage, and it would gradually increase a single ride pass to a weekly pass based on usage. So users are rewarded with additional rides, and they don't really lose their daily payment, because sometimes they're not able to, there are riders in our system that are not able to pay for the entire weekly and monthly pass at the same time. We believe that this is really going to be useful for a segment of our riders that would really need it. It's focused on our values on equity. And then that's the phase 1 that would begin in October. Talk about phase 2 in the next slide. And this, so what phase 2 would do is right now, when you go to our website, it transfers you to our vendor site where you would actually make the purchase online. And phase 2 does sort of a unified branding on our links. So it kind of provides a more seamless service. It will offer multiple language support, and it'll be ADA compliant, as well as it's going to allow you to have stored value wallet management as well. In phase 3, we become fully account-based system, and it would be integrated with smart card, and then there will be business rules put in place, and we're still in the process of developing some of those, but it'll really be fast, easy, and obviously equitable option. And then again, it will allow, because of the technology integration, it would allow for Apple, Google Wallet, and contactless payment as well. Phase 4 would be a fully open payment system. So credit card's going to be your account, and we would be able to be fully contactless, and as well as though we will have provisions for cash fare, because I don't believe that we would be moving away completely as a society to be fully contactless, but this is our effort, and we're fully in gear to have a healthier, safer fare payment system in effect. For those of you who have been in the Bay Area, have seen the SF Muni and BART have onboard validator that allows you to just tap and get on the vehicle. So it'll be very similar to that. And we'll be the first agency our size that would implement onboard validator and a fully fare capped contactless system. Next slide, please. And here I would like to kind of summarize and say what's new in Capital Metro. We're building our organizational capacity. It was now considered one of the most innovative agencies of our size. And that has a lot to do with our president and CEO and his focus on future. And to have future focused technology, have a very robust system plan with Project Connect. So our planning team, as I mentioned, is growing leaps and bounds in their skill sets. Our service planning group is very strong, and they combine their system understanding with the operations experience. Our leadership in sustainability and energy usage is something to mention. We were very fortunate to win two grants in sustainability grants to be able to add new electric buses to our fleet. And then last but not the least is our comprehensive and contextual approach in Project Connect. How is Project Connect different from other system plan? It is extremely implementation focused. In my previous experience, I delivered and worked on system planning process, and the level of outreach, the focus on implementation that Project Connect has put in makes it a remarkable process thus far. So it's in project development, and we are also focusing on funding mechanism, including New Start, Small Start, public-private opportunities, and innovative funding options for Project Connect. So here, this is our reminder, rather sudden but not inappropriate, that we are in a very difficult time. We are trying to plan ahead, planning for the future with a lot of innovative ideas, but we need to stay resilient at the moment. And here's our CapMetro's Stay Resilient message that you may have already seen. And there's another reminder as I transition to the latter part of the presentation and give it to Sam to talk about Project Connect. I do have another slide, but I think that's going to be before putting cart before the horse. Let's have the entire Project Connect presentation, and then if you have any question regarding how we are taking into account autonomous and connected technologies, then I'll talk a little bit about that. Sam, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Sharmila. Sharmila had mentioned that our leadership, including herself, are very forward-thinking, but our CEO, Randy Clark, who I know is a huge supporter of MECA and all of the associated chambers, I like to say that he's probably one of the few people who can reminisce about the future. He is always many steps ahead, and it's a really exciting time. And that's why I'm going to talk a bit about Project Connect, which I know that many of you here as community members, as business owners, have probably heard a lot about, but we are really nearing a critical phase as we move closer and closer to a community decision in November. So I just want to give a recap of the system, of the elements of the system, of what all has gone into it, and then what the next steps are. So the question, why transit? Why now? I think everybody here knows, and for any of you who are business people, or if you're in real estate, whatever it may be, everybody knows that we are growing at just a phenomenal rate. I think that up until recently, Austin had doubled in size every 25 years since World War II. Well, right now we're on a trend to double in about 20 years, maybe even 19, depending on what the growth looks like over the next decade and the decade after that. But we're going to go from 2 million people in this region to 4 million in, let's call it 20 years. If we do that, though, most estimates say that we wouldn't be able to expand the amount of road network, the amount of road capacity that we have by more than 11, maybe 12%. We've got a real issue of geometry. And some of you may have seen these slides, but you can see here in a city block, here's 48 people taking up, let's call this Lavaca, and we're between 4th and 5th Street, and this is rush hour. So you've got 48 people here on the bus, you've got 48 people here who are cyclists, and then you've got 48 people in individual cars. And at some point, something just has to give. And it could be that only half of the people in those cars move onto the bus, and then it frees up that much space for the rest of the folks who are trying to go wherever they're trying to go. Another version of this slide that you may not have seen, because there's so much discussion about autonomous and electric and TNCs, whether they're Uber or Lyft, they're all nice options, and it's good to have options. And especially when you're talking about technology, sustainable technology like electric vehicles, it's fantastic. But we still have a huge issue of geometry in any urban space. And so we need to allocate that equitably, we need to allocate it smartly. And transit is a tool for that. So getting to Project Connect specifically. So we know what the problem is. We know that it's people, it's congestion, and that it's limited space. But Project Connect, for anybody who's been here for more than, well, I guess it'd be 20 years exactly, in 2000, the community had a vote on light rail. And I think that that's important because we have a fantastic bus network. Sharmila mentioned we had been growing 18 straight months on our bus and rail network. So we have a good underlying system that has only gotten better and better in the past 2 years. What we haven't done is we haven't invested heavily in infrastructure. We've done it for highways, we've done it for parks, we've done it for libraries, we've done it for a lot of different things that have a lot of different uses, but we have not really done it for public transportation. So there was a failed vote in 2000, there was a failed vote in 2014. People couldn't agree on what the plan was going to look like, what the map was going to look like. For some people, the mode. Project Connect has really pulled together the best parts of some of the past plans, but it's all in the context of the growth today. It's in the context of the people who live here today, communities that are here, the businesses that are here. It's a once in a generation chance to invest in public transportation while we still have time. Our Vice Chair, Mayor Pro Tem, likes to say, your commute this morning, and I know that it's a little bit different since we're in sort of a teleworking mode and we're in the middle still of a pandemic crisis, but before March, she would say, your commute today was the best commute that you will ever have, because the growth rate is just so big. If we don't double down and invest in a solution, it may be too late to fix some of the problems that we have here from a mobility standpoint. We also need to make sure, second bullet here, opportunity to build equity and access to opportunity through public transportation. Public transportation is such a great equity tool. It can open doors to jobs and education and healthcare and just social interactions that might be closed if we are forced to all rely on a single occupancy vehicle. There are cost issues. There are people who simply can't drive. So public transportation is just a public good that allows people to be more independent and gives us a much more accessible, equitable community. And so we've developed a system of rail, advanced bus, and other innovative transit technologies. And as I'll get to at the very end of this, it's a community-driven plan. I think that the effort that has gone into community engagement for this project is greater than any that I've seen, honestly, nationally. I mean, there are a lot of other transit agencies that have done a really great job reaching out to communities, especially harder to reach communities. And I think that we've done a fantastic job so far, reaching over 60,000 people. Many of you have probably gone onto our website, which is www.projectconnect.com, or you've gone to one of our in-person events before March, or you've read about us in the news or in community impact or whatever it might be. But here are the elements of Project Connect. And I'll very quickly go through each of these in their own slides. It's going to be fast, but again, I encourage you to go to projectconnect.com. I'll also share the slide deck at the end of the presentation so people can look at it on their own time. But we've got light rail lines, the orange and the blue. Those are really going to be the core corridors for this system. We're talking about Lamar and South Congress and Riverside into downtown. METRORAPID, which we already have 2 lines of that have been really successful since they started in 2014, We're talking about expanding that system greatly. So bus services that are 5, 10, 12, 15 minutes, really just a bus reinvented, more passenger amenities, more real-time arrival information, which we have in the system, but just a lot more of that. Enhancements to the existing red line, as well as the green line, which is currently a freight corridor that we own heading out towards Manor and Elgin. And then more Metro Express, park and ride, bus service and bus stop amenities, Metro Access, which is for folks with disabilities, getting to a zero emission fleet, as Sharmila mentioned earlier, improving customer technology. The fare technology she mentioned is a really big part of that. Creating new circulator zones. Some of you may live in areas that are in one of our 6 pickup zones. Those are the on-demand Uber pool style services that we have in areas where it may not make as much sense to put a fixed route bus. And then just improving our maintenance facilities. And that's really more kind of an in-house thing. But as any of you know, if you're in a business or just in your own home or you own your own car, whatever it may be, you can't do much long-term without maintenance, and you will certainly save yourself a lot of money in the long run with a good maintenance program. I think we have one of the best in the business, and we just want to make sure that as we grow, we're not neglecting that. That's something that other projects and other transit agencies have encountered, where you get the funding for a beautiful upfront system that makes a lot of sense, you're able to operate it, but then maintenance begins to build and build. And so we can't handicap future generations of Capital Metro customers if we don't maintain the system properly. So I mentioned the orange line here. You can see on the map to the right. I apologize if it's small, but again, on the website, projectconnect.com, it's much, much easier to explore. This would be a light rail line that runs from North Austin, down North Lamar, through downtown, and then heads out on South Congress, heading in the direction of Slaughter. We've got statistics here that have the predicted weekday ridership of 54 to 74,000 people on this corridor alone. This is already our busiest corridor by far on METRORAPID and our regular METROBUS. It moves a lot of people on transit because it's got good transit supportive density, and it's got a really good mix of customers. It's got a really good mix of businesses. It generates a lot of trips, and that's so critical to making sure that when we put in an investment of this size, that we continue to see the ridership. And then you can also see some of the sample travel times here, whether it's the full length of the route, Tech Ridge to Slaughter, probably a less likely trip, but then some of the shorter ones, like going from UT to South Congress in 25 minutes in rush hour as opposed to 33 minutes now, and who knows what that might look like in 10 years. Same with the blue line. This is one that a lot of folks are interested in because it would connect the airport via the Riverside corridor into downtown and then head north again. You know, we get a lot of questions. We have a really great route out to the airport, Route 20, which is part of our high frequency route. Sees a lot of business during events like South by Southwest and F1. Sees a lot of traffic generally though, because one thing that people I think sometimes forget, probably not a lot of the business folks on this call, but you forget how many people are employed at the airport. And that's a lot of folks heading to work at a lot of different times of day. So it's really great for transit because it's not just the AM and the PM peak, it's just all hours of the day. And as the airport grows, we know that it will continue to be really successful for passengers, but also this will be a really important way to get people in a variety of different jobs out to the airport. The downtown transit tunnel. This is a really incredible, really exciting investment. I grew up here in Austin. I went up to Boston for college and for grad school, but I'm from Austin, and I can just tell you, and I'm sure many of you here on the webinar probably would agree, I don't think that I ever could have envisioned the idea of us having a subway tunnel in the middle of downtown Austin. I would go to other cities and I would ride their systems and I would think, what a fantastic thing to bury the transit beneath. You save the space above. You can do all sorts of placemaking underground, especially today where that's really a focus that transit agencies have. You know, whether you've been to some major stations like in Denver or LA where they put a really nice signature onto a lot of their underground stations. But the ability to grade separate this investment so that it's not stuck in traffic, but so there's also more room up on the streets in downtown to move more transit or more vehicles or more deliveries, whatever it might be. More METRORAIL, as I mentioned, we already have the 32-mile red line that heads up towards Leander. We are working with some private entities on a couple of new stations up in the Domain area. As many of you know, when the red line opened in 2010, it was kind of a blank canvas. It was an existing freight corridor, and who knew that, or at least I didn't know, that we would get the second downtown of Austin up there near Kramer Station, and so much growth in the Howard and Lakeline and Leander areas. And of course, places like Plaza Saltillo and MLK. And then the Green Line, which would hit the Plaza Saltillo station before heading out east towards Colony Park as part of our proposed phase 1, and then longer term out to Manor, which is one of our member cities like Leander is. And MetroRapid, this is the 801 and the 803, but really improving some of the existing MetroRapid services, the kind of better bus rapid transit, whatever you may know it as, so that it connects better with the light rail system and with the commuter rail system, with some of the innovative transit zones similar to our current pickup, and doing whatever we can do to improve transit times, whether you're heading up towards Tech Ridge, down to Oak Hill, any of these crosstown routes, or out towards the Expo Center. We expect this to have really healthy weekday ridership and to really help support that underlying backbone of the whole system, which is always really going to be the bus. It just has more flexibility, and there's always going to be more of it. New park and rides. We've got a couple of my favorite renderings here, but some new facilities for people who live more in outlying areas. So when you think about the issue of congestion in Austin, a lot of it is just what gets captured as it enters the city, because so many people in Central Texas work in Austin and they don't live in Austin, either by choice or because they can't afford to anymore. So how can we provide good transit service on the periphery of the system, but also getting people in these transit capture points so we can keep their cars on the edge of the city, so that we can hopefully reduce or at least mitigate some of the congestion in Central Austin. Currently, we have 16 existing park and rides. Project Connect proposes quite a few more, some of them in the service area, some of them proposed for areas that are not yet members of Capital Metro, or we might be able to work out an agreement like we've been able to do with Round Rock. That's been a really successful partnership, which is fantastic considering the size of Round Rock, you know, being a suburban city of over 100,000 that was not connected by transit. We've really formed a great relationship with them and seen really healthy ridership between the local bus and the express bus. And again, it's also a place no different than those light rail stations, no different than the underground, the downtown transit tunnel. It's an opportunity for placemaking. And then MetroBus, there are always improvements, always investments that can and should be made in our regular underlying bus network to make sure that we have the right amenities, the right frequencies, that we're doing whatever we can to serve as many places as we can, and also to add those little things, better vehicles, more shade, more lighting, real-time arrival information, which we've really invested heavily in because you think about the experience of riding the bus and how different it is when you know exactly when it's going to come, when you're out of the elements. It's just a lot of different ways to dignify the transit experience and not only dignify the transit experience, but also encourage more people to take transit for work, for pleasure, whatever it might be. More circulators. Here's a picture actually of one of our pickup vehicles. This one is over there at Springdale General in one of our zones on the east side. This has been a really fantastic service because it's on demand. Unlike a private TNC, it's $1.25, which is our regular fare for the bus. So it really is a first mile, last mile, because you're paying to enter the system, so to speak, on pickup. And let's say it drops you off at the Springdale HEB, and then you connect to the 20. Or maybe that's just the end of your trip, and you go back onto the app or call our call center and get a ride back home. But there's a lot of flexibility in pickup. which makes it also a very good equity tool, especially in areas that have lower density. And then Metro Access. This is our service for folks with disabilities. There are a lot of different ways that the investments in Project Connect will benefit our Metro Access clients, including the customer-facing technology. At the end of the day, we're heading towards 2 more joint sessions. I believe that those will be our 7th and 8th joint sessions with the Austin City Council and our board of directors. And this has been to lay the groundwork for how do we build a system this size? How do we make an investment this big, and how do we do it together? The City of Austin has always been our closest partner. Outside of the red line, we operate in their right-of-way. So we are always partnering with them day in and day out because we are not in a situation where we own a lot of our own, a lot of the areas where our buses run. We do own our park and rides and things like that, but the city is always going to be our closest partner, and they have been throughout this whole journey together. And so the idea to govern this system, especially during the construction portion, when we're merging Capital Metro money, possibly City of Austin money, possibly federal money, and putting it under the umbrella of the Austin Transit Partnership, which would be a local government corporation, a joint venture between Capital Metro and the City of Austin. And then real quick, transit investments, just looking at ways that they are a catalyst for economic opportunity, for economic growth. We have the opportunity to take some of our council members and some of our board members to see some of these cities that I would consider peers. And while some of them may be far larger than we are or have invested far more heavily, I think that they're peers because it's what we should look like in 10, 20, 30 years or further, or they've done smaller, more granular things to their transit systems that we should be able to emulate. And so all of these cities, Los Angeles, Seattle, Denver, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, they've all made very large to relatively large investments in their transit systems. And it was a chance to talk with business folks there, community leaders, as well as their elected officials to say, how did you get community consensus? How did you get community support? And what were the pitfalls that you saw as you were out trying to educate folks on the benefits of transit and educating folks while you're building out a system? Because that's going to be really, really critical in the coming years. Some of the things that I took photos of because I just think that they're really important because these benefit both the transit customer and the non-customer, or I would call them future customer. Finding ways to integrate art, finding ways to integrate local businesses, finding ways to do placemaking that works for the person waiting for transit and the person just passing through. You can see Houston Metro on their shelters, Denver Union Station, which is one of the most, I think, one of the most beautiful transit facilities in the country. Ways to do sustainable placemaking. This is Indianapolis on the left. You can see that they've done some bioswales and a lot of community gardens around their facilities. And then here's one of the subways in Los Angeles on the right. Each of the stations that are underground have their own unique character, and they're meant to reflect some theme of the community that's above. Transit technology, Sharmila got into a lot of this, but here's just a couple of photos of ways that as the system grows, we can not only become greener, but just see all sorts of benefits, aesthetic and environmental, from doing things like this surface current collection. So you've got an electric train here that doesn't have overhead wires. You've even got the green space underneath the rails, hydrogen vehicles, both rail and bus, and autonomous vehicles. And then some analysis of economic opportunity that's specific to Austin. There's a national statistic that's out there that says for every $1 invested in transit, there's $4 of economic activity. And as we looked at some of the opportunities here in Central Texas, $1 billion invested, $1.38 billion in economic activity. That's really direct economic activity. And, sort of who knows all the things that can come from a really well-built, really well-planned transit system. And then also job creation that stems from doing such an enormous investment, some of them very immediate and many of them long-term. And then I'm going to close just with a little bit of what we heard. Like I mentioned, we've talked to over 60,000 folks. We've had 60,000 engagements, whether they be online or back when we were able to talk to people in person and go to them. We've had project advisory groups that have been made up of technical advisors, as well as our Pecan, which is the Project Connect Ambassador Network. Some of you on this call are members of that or participated in these groups. And we've also worked really closely with the City Corridor Program to make sure that the investments from the city's 2016 bond merge and synthesize really well with everything that we're talking about for Project Connect. And then the joint meetings that I mentioned. We have one on Monday, the next on August 7th, and these will be some pretty major decisions about the Austin Transit Partnership, about funding, and on the City Council side, the possibility of putting this on the November 2020 ballot. And then tonight, we have a virtual community meeting. The mayor, our chairman, and Councilmember Kitchen will be there. Randy Clark, our CEO, and then some of our colleagues from the city, and Dave Couch, our program officer for Project Connect. We're going to run through some of the funding scenarios that would include property tax, the governance structure for the Austin Transit Partnership, and then just a recap of where we've been, both here's what the system is, and here's the engagement effort we've done, including a discussion of anti-displacement efforts, equity, and active transportation. So that's going to be at 5 p.m. tonight. If you go to www.projectconnect.com, you can see the link. It's going to be via Zoom. And then in partnership with the Austin Chamber on the 20th, we have a Zoom session called Accelerate. And this is really going to highlight how can DBE, WBE, other small businesses participate in Project Connect. So we're going to talk about some of our current Capital Metro opportunities, what we see coming from Project Connect, and Peter Rogoff, who's the CEO of Sound Transit in Seattle, as you saw in my earlier slide, they've done a $54 billion project up there. He's going to be our guest speaker and just talk about what that whole process has been like for that community over a couple of decades now. And with that, that is Project Connect. I think I just barely came in on time because I did want to leave some amount of room for any questions. But again, I will share this deck. My name is Sam Sargent. I can be reached at sam.sargent@capmetro.org. And I just want to say thank you for having us here. And with that, I think I will turn this back over to Tam if we want to either close or move into questions. But again, just want to say thank you very much for having us.
Tim may be on mute. Thank you. This is Tina Cannon at the Austin LGBT Chamber of Commerce. Great information. The innovation slides in that deck were so powerful, and it is great to see and yet sad to see all at the same time, given that we're Austin, Texas. And I think the assumption is that we should already be here. We should already be there. So I really appreciate that information coming out to the community. There were some questions in the Q&A that were pretty much handled. And I know someone had asked for the deck to be shared in the contacts. And I know
will share that.
Asian Chamber are doing all the technical work behind the scenes on today's event. And I know that Marina and her team will get that out to anybody who needs it.
Yeah, as long as you registered for the event, we have your email and we'll share all the information. We have a bunch of questions. Sharmila was so efficient answering them even before we got to them. But I think maybe, Sharmila, if you want to, maybe go through some of those that you already did answer, because other people might have been not paying attention to all your answers. But the first one from Rachel, update the service plan in a week, whereas this usually takes 3 to 4 months. She was interested in understanding how this was speeded up.
Yes. Well, I believe I answered that, but I'll respond to Rachel's question. Hi, Rachel. So that was essentially due to a combination of factors. The first and foremost would be the technical capacity of our service planning team and their familiarity with our system. The first and foremost. Then I think we had a distinct advantage because we had gone through the system redesign with CAP remap, and we had a very robust Sunday schedule. So we were able to modify our Sunday schedule, and there was almost a preloaded, not quite emergency planning, but a preloaded Sunday schedule that we were able to easily manipulate to get to where we need to be on the scheduling side of things. Now, the challenge is always operationalizing that, and I think that's where this is my first major public sector management position. And I would say that I have worked with many transit agencies, and I have seen good interaction between service planning and operations, but I'm yet to see the level of relationship that our service planning team has with our operations. It's almost like hand in glove, as our president and CEO often refers to it. And I think that relationship helps a lot. So to be able to understand the system's weaknesses and opportunities, and I think our service planning director had that. And hi, Roberto, thanks goes to you. This is to Roberto Gonzalez. And he and his team were able to sort of take that schedule run and be able to operationalize that, understanding our strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's where we were able to do that. It was still a challenge. The first week, operationalizing that was a challenge, but in second week, we were able to fine tune that and do much better.
Okay, now we'll go on to all the open questions that haven't been answered. Now that you all know that Sharmila's got answers on the answer piece. Patricia asks if you all can address projected timelines for the new stations.
I can get everybody here that information. I have a schedule that sort of breaks out what the next 10 years of Project Connect looks like, including a lot of the things like station improvements that are really early on. So if you don't mind, I'd love to be able to just provide that by email. And then I'll obviously include my email, and then we can follow up on that. I saw that question in the chat, and I wasn't able to scramble to get a verbal answer quick enough.
No, that's great. We can move on and try to answer some of the others that are
question, so I'll follow up on that.
Okay, sounds good. Robert is asking if there are other experience improvements underway, merging pickup into the main app, refine wait times, multi-fees.
I think you may have frozen real quick. I've got Robert's question here in front of me. Sharmila, this one may be more in your area. But I do know that our IT team, we've used a company called Via for our pickup app for a long while. It's worked very well, but we would love to see more integration so that it is just one-stop shopping when you get into our app. But Sharmila, I don't know if on things like METROBIKE or any future partnerships, if you have any other updates just on those kind of integrations. Great question.
No, that's a great question. So right now we're formalizing the ILA, which is the interlocal agreement between City of Austin and CapMetro to move forward with the METROBIKE program. And we have talked about the technical interface and our desire to see what we need to see there. But in terms of which vendor is going to provide that decision hasn't been made yet. We have just in the last month explored a lot of opportunities on how to improve our interface, but that's for the next presentation when I should be able to give you an update on that.
And I think there was another question here about integrating the fare payment system with our new ERP. I think that would probably fall into the same vein. I don't have a ready answer, but I'd be more than happy. Once I share my contact, or Marina, if you're sharing my contact information, be happy to follow up with that question. I've gotten it before, but I don't want to misspeak on anything.
Super. I think this is a really important question, certainly for the MECA chambers, the equity piece of it. So remap eliminated some connectivity. Why is the orange line solid instead of dashed, considering the area north of US 183? So, I guess it's ZCJ is asking you all to be honest in, in your answer.
So the area that is north of 183, as well as south of South Congress Transit Center, no, I apologize, William Cannon is TxDOT right-of-way, which does pose a unique challenge because it requires a different partnership and different agreements than we have with the City of Austin. The map that we have shows the full system build out, so it is not dotted. If you go onto our website now, or if you're able to participate this evening in the 5 o'clock meeting, we'll show two different versions of what this investment could look like, because the biggest, most important difference would be one investment would be all up front. So it's how do you build out a $10 billion system, not all at once, of course, but you make that investment and the tax rate election is done accordingly. The other would be more of an initial investment, which wouldn't include that area that's within the TxDOT right-of-way, which is where you might have seen maps that show the dotted line on there. I think that's probably the most succinct explanation for why this map was different, was that this is the full build-out map that I showed. I think in terms of the equity component, every single thing that we do goes through a Title VI analysis, since we're recipients of federal funds, but also because that's just part of our commitment to this community. A lot of what drives what is chosen for these corridors are things like potential ridership, whether densities are there, whether trip generation can be expected. And that's why it's so important for us to build out more of the METRORAPID routes and build a better bus network, so that in these corridors where you don't have opportunities for big, heavy investments like Orange or Blue Line today, there are investments in what we might term equity corridors now in bus, and then in the future on rail if the ridership is there. Sharmila, I don't know if you had anything else to contribute on the Title VI piece.
No, I have to say that I really see when I get questions on mode, why rail over bus or bus over rail versus, and why not subway, I really go back to our not just carrying capacity, but really what's out there, the density, the ridership, the current ridership, the future forecasted ridership. And having said that, if you look at current 801, I mean, that paved the way for Orange Line. So I think if we are able to provide service where needs exist now in the best way possible, and the most feasible way possible, then as ridership grows, we would be able to sort of then move on and transition to the higher level of mode. So I seen that model to be very successful. And I would say that I was not here during CAP remap. I've only been here 8 months, but I have, I understand that it's been a generally very successful process, and the results of CAP remap really helped us increase our ridership, but it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. So I would say that there are opportunities for improvement, and we are quite aware of that, and we're just trying to kind of, and again, I would highlight our recovery plan here when it comes to how it reflects our values. We are increasing we're providing additional frequency on our local routes to accommodate social distancing, and that's where our Q buses are coming in when we are figuring out there's an overcrowding issue. And our commuter and express routes, we have the most reduced service at that level. So I think when you see that, and that's because ridership doesn't exist, so it kind of goes hand in hand, but I would say that I think through the actions that we have made, I think our commitment to equity and providing service to all and providing to where the greatest need exists is quite evident.
Super, thank you. Shubda had asked a question. I know, Sharmila, you answered it already, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about it, because we're all the chambers and it's all our businesses here, so they might be interested in learning about the focus on public-private partnerships.
So I would say I can speak to one project that we're currently working on, and that's to me, it's the top of my head, so easy to talk about. It's the Broadmoor Station near Domain on our Red Line. And we are currently proceeding forward with design. Final design has been complete, and we're moving forward with plans and construction to begin in fall of this year. And it's with a Brandywine Realty Trust, and they are our partner in that. And we, the agreement and a lot of the details are still evolving, so I would not be going into that. But I think that when it's in full implementation, it will serve a very good example of public-private partnership that Capital Metro engaged in and engaged right now.
Okay, I think we've covered all the questions. There was one comment about the leadership in LA and Denver making a huge difference, and I think our leadership is out there and will be, once the actual plan comes out, I think there's going to be a lot of support for it. If we're done with questions, maybe I'll just hang on just a little, like a minute, to see if anybody else has other questions for our panelists. And if not, I'll turn it over maybe to Tina to wrap us up. Tina, are you still here?
Yes, ma'am. You can't get rid of me no matter how hard you try.
Well, there are lots of more opportunities, I think, to learn. We're going to be hosting something with CapMetro in September, but you see all the events in August too. So we, just keep up with us, and we'll be marketing those events as they're planned out.
So I have one thing to add, if I may, as my parting thought, because this is my first forum. I would say, first of all, thank you for the opportunity. And Sam and I are very excited about what's going on with CapMetro in the community and all the support we have. But I would say chambers have played consistently a very strong and powerful role in making transit, a higher level of transit, come to a community. So you have a lot to offer to that. And do not forget your role, and then we will come back to you and have additional presentation if you have time for us.
Yeah, and it's very key, and you hit the nail on the head. We have some big decisions ahead of us as a community. It is vitally important for us to get caught up on transit as a community for our workforce, to enable access for multiple communities across the city and across our region. And we really appreciate the work of CapMetro and the team to really professionalize and bring us into where we should have been and then take us to where we need to go. So we really do appreciate that. We encourage everybody to take a strong look at Project Connect and know that you will likely have an opportunity to speak your voice during the election.
Yeah.
And we urge you as business owners, as those who are in the workforce, that this is vitally important to our economy and to our future. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Marina to say final thank yous, and let's get everybody off this lovely call and on to the next.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. You'll be getting email from Ishan, presentations, and stay safe out there. Stay cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.